Now, in order to discuss that story further, I'm joined by Michael O'Neill. He is the communications manager of the U.S. Green Party. Michael, thank you for joining Press TV. So, a UN analysis under the Paris Climate Accord shows that global emissions will be up by 16% in 2030 than they were in 2010. And say that in order to stave off disastrous climate change, we need to reduce global emissions by 45% by 2030. Are we on the brink of a point of no return? And if we are, whose fault is it?
We are absolutely approaching the brink of no return. And I just want to start off by saying that the IPCC, as laudable as their work has been, historically their estimates have proven to be too conservative regarding how fast we are accelerating in terms of warming the planet. And so we actually, as a Green Party here in the United States, we're calling for 100% remissions in greenhouse gases by 2030. And that has been the cornerstone of our eco-socialist Green New Deal campaigning for, that Green candidates have been campaigning for since 2010.
Now, Antonio Guterres said that richer nations should deliver on their commitments. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. One of the cornerstones of the environmental movement is that the polluter pays. And in the case of averting a climate catastrophe, the polluters and the profiteers must pay. Those nations whose economic booms, whose economic growth has been built up over decades or even for over a century on fossil fuel emissions that future generations will suffer from, must pay to lead a just transition away from fossil fuels, 100% clean, renewable energy by 2030, using a framework that we like to call energy democracy, and we believe the way to get there is through an eco-socialist transformative Green New Deal. The United States is victim frequently to thoughts of American exceptionalism. And if we are to demonstrate even the slightest shred of accuracy to the high opinion that we hold for ourselves as a country, it is incumbent upon us for our own safety, for the salvation of our children and future generations, and certainly for the rest of the planet, to do everything that we can to lead the planet in a real response to the climate catastrophe. In this country, within our own politics, is that we have one party, the Republican Party, that denies the climate crisis exists, and then we have another party, the Democratic Party, that denies the climate crisis solutions exist. So we as the Green Party are advocating real solutions to a real crisis.
Also, speaking of the U.S., Boris Johnson said that the U.S. should actually step up efforts in order to help developing countries to fight climate change. What's the role that the U.S. can play in all this, given the fact that the U.S. pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord?
I'm not in the habit of agreeing with Boris Johnson on anything, including the color of the sky, but in this case, Boris Johnson is right. The United States a moral obligation to do more. Every country on the planet has an obligation to do what they can to avert this crisis. The richest countries and the countries of the global north and the countries like the United States that have participated in a kind of fossil fuel empire around the world have the highest obligations. What we have been calling for is for a $42 trillion eco-socialist Green New Deal that would be allocated over 10 years. That's the domestic policy that the Green Party of the United States has been calling for in our country. This is far larger than the $3.5 trillion stimulus package that has been introduced at various points by the Democrats in Congress currently. And so, again, our goal is 100% zero carbon or fossil fuel emissions by 2030. That is the gold standard according to the science of what it will take to avert this crisis. And the crisis is already here. And not just for the Maldives, not just for countries in the global south or along the equator that for many years now have been ravaged by climate effects. In our own country, in the United States, we just had yet another summer of record heat waves, of ravaging wildfires. The planet is literally burning around us. And so we are long past time for bold, decisive action. It's good to hear the UN Secretary General calling for that. The United Nations, it remains to be seen to what extent they can hold the United States being a member of the Security Council. My fellow countrymen here in the United States, we need to engage in grassroots democracy to elect people and elect a party like the Green Party that actually sees the climate crisis for what it really is and is willing to advance the solutions that are necessary, even if those fly in the face of the interests of capital and the fossil fuel lobby.
Michael O'Neill, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Thank you for joining Press TV. I've been talking to Michael O'Neill. He is the communications manager of the Green Party of the U.S., joining us out of New York.